Now, during the interim budget 2024 that was announced earlier in the morning today, there has been a strong reference that was made by our finance minister. And this is important to note because we talk about the global presence of India on a strategic note, why there was a mention of IMEC, why it is important to strengthen our port connectivity, why is it important for the country to build strategic associations for global trade. All these discussions are going to be held in this debate in the next 25 minutes. And let's start my conversation with Professor Madhav Nalapat. Professor Nalapat, mentioning India's strategic goals, mentioning India's foreign policy during budgets is, it's not very common. The fact that Nirmala Sitharaman, the finance minister, has spoken about it today, mentioning about the G20 announcement, it happened in New Delhi about IMEC, that brings the focus on port connectivity, trade via maritime, that India needs to build further, strengthen further, keeping in mind there has been the Indian subcontinent, the Indian Ocean region that has been in peril. There have been number of increased instances where India has also started showing its strength, whether it is the rescue operations against the Somali pirates, or for that matter the airstrikes coming in from Yemen, in the Arabian Sea, in the Indian Ocean region, or for that matter the Indian vessels, the Indian Navy destroyers that are also parked at this point of time in Gulf of Aden. So in a situation such as this, why we talk about trade, and we also talk about our presence in the seas, which was not the way it now is. It has increased manifold if we take a look at the past examples in just a few weeks.
Well, the fact is, Megha, that first of all, it's very good that the finance minister mentioned the points that you touched upon, for a simple reason that India's prosperity depends in large part also on the rest of the world. You know, shocks such as the war in Ukraine, the war in Gaza, they can impact India and the Indian economy. On the other hand, increases in the volume of trade between India and the rest of the world, reduction of cost in items that India imports, and an increase in the price of the items that India can export. Having more partners come and basically locate their production units in India. Now you have a huge number of Japanese companies that flocked to China in the 1980s and 1990s. And frankly, the reality is that China has been for quite some time, but now very openly hostile to Japan. So obviously these Japanese companies, and the Japanese are intensely proud and patriotic people, they would like to come to a friendlier country, and a friendlier country with the available brain power, human power, etc., that China has got. And India has got that in abundance. So the reality is that we have to look at the budget as a lot more than simply funding the government for a year. Traditionally, governments in India have looked at the budget basically as a way of arranging funding for one particular year, whether surplus or deficit. This government is looking at the budget as a means for prosperity in a globalized context where India and the rest of the world work together and where they are interlinked together. And that is where you're seeing the significance of the mention of foreign policy, trade, in the coastline of India. Now, coastline of India brings me to another point. That is, there's so much potential in India. Not only human potential, but locational potential that has gone unused because it has not been recognized by previous governments. This government has recognized that potential and is systematically working to utilize that potential.
Right.
So from that point of view, it's a huge change.
Absolutely. Yeah, Pathakrit, quickly coming to you. Another aspect that has been touched upon by the finance minister today during the announcement was about the creation of Gift City and how this has been made a reality in London. There is something similar that is being built in Dubai, there is Hong Kong, there is Singapore, and the Gift City concept has at this point of time become a tangible, implementable, executed success story, and it only needs to be built further and attract the kind of FIIs, FDIs that we are hoping it will.
Yeah, Megha, good evening. As Professor Nalapur rightly mentioned, the difference between this government and what has happened in the past is that this government is looking at it from a long-term perspective. Some of the schemes and initiatives may not give return immediately, but 10 years down the line, it would have already created the kind of system necessary for larger absorption of investments. Yeah, the importance of these offshore centers like the GIFT is very important. The criticality comes from the point is that there are a large number of such foreign institutional investors or other investors who might be interested in investing in a particular country, but may not be very much comfortable with lots of issues related to complexities of taxes and other regulations. Therefore, you create such kind of cities where your rules and regulations are a little different and probably at par with the ones which are globally acceptable norms. And that's why you create the right kind of bridge between your domestic requirement as well as at the same time creating an environment where global investors feel almost at home. Let me tell you, for a long time, Singapore used to be considered a European city in Asia.
Right.
So when you create GIFT kind of city, you are taking away to a great extent the competitive edge city states like Singapore used to have. And it's a great initiative in terms of having these centers, which then become a core point from which investments to rest of the country goes. Another point I want to mention, the importance of the supply chain, the importance of factors like an India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. The reason is that post-COVID, it was realized that unless you have a seamless supply chain in place, you would have large number of disruptions. It would create problems. So the government has worked on three things rather. Development of resilient supply chains, of which GIFT City is also, you can call a nerve center kind of things coming up. Development of infrastructure to create the capacity of the country to absorb investments. And third, the economic corridors, maybe with, one is India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor, or the North-South, corridor, which is being created from North-South transport corridor from Russia to India. I think these are very, very critical elements. India has played a very critical role on the issue of supply chain. During the COVID situation, India was the first country, rather the only country which gave vaccines to more than 100 countries.
Right.
It's a very critical supply chain issue. Second, the way Indian Navy is trying to secure the sea routes right now, when you have challenges from the Houthis or the Somalian pirates, unless you secure your supply chains and you invest, not just for your supply chain security, but for everybody, you would not have seamless global trade.
Agreed.
And I think these are the very important issues that has been
You're right. You're right. And that's why, I mentioned that point just a moment ago, and I'm going to bring that again. Rupinder Sachdev, is this just a coincidence that there have been more and more of the Indian Navy destroyers and warships that have come to the rescue of several of these attacks that have taken place in Gulf of Aden on merchant ships? We talk about the Arabian Sea, or even the Somali pirates that have attacked these Pakistani crew that were aboard these merchant vessels, or we talk about the Sri Lankan crew members on those vessels. So is this just a coincidence, or is this a well thought out design by the government of India to push the Indian Navy to be seen visible as doing work on the ground, to be holding themselves responsible and accountable for everything that happens in the Indian Ocean region, in the areas that they themselves feel to be strong enough to take a stand that, listen, we are a strong, vibrant democracy, we stand for sovereignty, and every single time there is a law that is going to be flouted, we are going to be coming up and acting on it and coming up with our rescue operations, relief operations, as has been witnessed.
Thank you, Megha. So very well, contextualized. I would say it has been a mix. It has been a coincidence of sorts. We could even say that, but more it has been an evolution, of India, the Indian state, and our natural growth. And by evolution, I mean in the sense that, as our economy grows, as our military, by military, I mean all wings, the army, air force, navy grow, it is but incumbent upon us for our own national security to expand our own, theater where we can be effective. That's one. It's incumbent upon us as a nation state to expand our areas of influence, to kind of create firewalls and buffers for our own internal security. At the same time, it is incumbent upon us to play this role because we are 1/7 or 1/6 of global humanity. So the world expects of us also such a role to be played, especially in areas of our neighborhood. Now, stepping back, a quick, visual contextualization, something which Professor Ralaba said, Pathikra said, the world of today, I have a model I think I've shared with you earlier also. I take liberty quick, as a visual model. The world of today is a matrix. Okay, it is a matrix wherein nations and supply chains are connecting. Some supply chains are stronger, some are weaker. There are partnerships, there's competition, there's cooperation. So in this matrix, all nations are trying to figure out their own best, options. And to the point of reference in the budget, the domestic economy of any country, be it the economy or whatever we may say, socio-economic development in multiple aspects, on this planet Earth is interconnected. So therefore, the idea of a budget like 20 years ago, wherein we would be content to kind of our prime minister, ministers would be content to say how they're tinkering with the domestic Indian economy, is, I think, something of the past. Because the world of today and the India of today is so interconnected, and we are dependent, we do realize, I mean, on factors like oil, energy security, chips, electronics, you name it. And each nation has these vulnerabilities. We also have. So, what is happening now is that in order to reinforce the strength of our nation, our national capabilities, we are cognizant of the vectors which are out there, and therefore, definitely, yes, our foreign policy has to align, has to work towards, delivering benefits for the state of for India.
Right, but does it come as a surprise to you that why is it that all these upheavals, all these changes, or transformations or pivots are happening at this juncture? Why was the government not efficient enough or far-sighted enough to think about the plan to build a port connectivity? Because, well, that's the truth, because we lie at a position on the map, on the earth, where we are, where 2/3 of the country is surrounded by the seas, by the oceans. So what has stopped us? What have been the limitations for the economy to build their maritime forces so strong to ensure there is larger percentage of the trade that happens through the seas?
A couple of points to that. One, I mean, if we look back, you see, we've come a long way from 1947, whatsoever it may be. Last 10, 15, 20 odd years, our economy has grown and has grown at a very fast clip. Our aspirations have grown. We've been negotiating back and forth with multiple, world players, US, India nuclear deal, Russia oil deal, American pressures and all. So we've now come into a newer age, I think, and we are more confident and we are more daring. We are pushing the envelope. We are no longer kind of, just hunkering down and thinking that, okay, things are beyond us. We are now thinking, for whatsoever collective reasons, we are now thinking that we are an co-equal player in this global ecosystem.
Right.
We gotten more, yes, more confidence, you may say, more substance, you may say, and more imagination, and we've seen case studies. So we are much more proactive in pushing the envelope where we think not only our national interest but the global national interest lies. And that's what the world of today needs. And because of that, I think we are getting an additional recognition, partnerships with global players.
Okay, all right. I have with me Satoru Nagao. He's a researcher from Hudson Institute. He's also a Japanese national. Thank you, Satoru, for joining us on the telecast. And a quick glance at how India's maritime trade has been given the impetus, but also a very strategically important aspect to touch is Quad, where Japan and India are important partners. Safeguarding of the Indian Ocean region, the Indo-Pacific, has been important. How are maritime trade and securing and protecting strategic interests in the Indian Ocean region closely associated?
Thank you very much for inviting me. Yes, economic development rely on maritime security because we can see in the history, ocean is safer than the land route. You can imagine China is building infrastructure in Pakistan, but there is a Kashmir, there is a Balochistan, there are many problems. So land route is dangerous. So even if we can see the news of the Houthi attack the ship, but still, sea is better than the land route. That's why economic development rely on sea. But in the Indian Ocean, we worry one thing. China is expanding influence. So there is a competition. India's development rely on this competition. India must win in the Indian Ocean. Indian Ocean should be the Indian Ocean. That is very important part. And in this case, Quad or Japan-India cooperation contribute this thing because we share the same threat, China. And we have the infrastructure. Indeed, when we check the history, why China expand so easily? Because Japan support China's infrastructure in the past. Because Japan believed China in the past. And they betrayed it. So that's why now Japan has a will to build a port in India and connect port and port in the Indian Ocean, which other like-minded countries, the US, Australia, the more of these countries rely on maritime security. That's why this is a chance for India, chance for the age of India. So that is the reason this is very important. And India realized that's why India deployed a ship in the Arabian Sea. And at the same time, the Bay of Bengal, India is also focusing on. So now is the time of the maritime security.
Okay, okay, all right. Professor Nalapith, talking particularly about the trade routes in the seas, in the oceans, and we talk about Malacca Straits, we talk about the Gulf of Aden, talk about the Red Sea. Now, these are the strategically important straits where billions and billions of dollars worth of goods pass, including crude oil, including gas. In a situation such as this, how can India make the subcontinent a lucrative trade route, and do we have the capacities at this point of time domestically to ensure that our ports are big enough, our capacities are large enough, and we are not just in the mechanism of shipbreaking, but there has to be entrepreneurship shown, enterprise shown in building ships, because at this point the traditional ship building players are Japan, and there is Europe, and these nations have traditionally been the monopoly players in shipbuilding. And what are the shortcomings for us to not getting into this particular realm, and how soon can this be transformed?
Well said, Megha, and I want to agree completely with the excellent points made by my good friend Satoru Nagao. Absolutely correct, Satoru, what you have said. I want to point out that we need three conditions to be met for a safe harbor for investment. Satoru was quite right in pointing out that a huge amount of the growth of China has been powered by Japan. And Japan has been repaid with hostility and with various other actions that are completely the reverse of the gratitude that should be shown by China to a sustained assistance it has got. The point is, it's not just that if you're able, you have to be a suitable partner. And if you're a country that is hostile to another country, you are not a suitable partner for that other country. There's no question about that. You have to be not just able, but suitable. Secondly, you have to be not just able, but reliable. The United States may be able, but is it reliable? Administrations in the United States, cabinet officers in the United States, the mood of the presidents of the United States, they change like the weather in London. They keep changing. So today, the United States says, no, I will ban X item from export to Y country. Or, okay, I will sanction it today. Tomorrow, the president will change of mood. No, I'll ban it. So the United States may be able, but the United States is not always reliable. And that's a fact of life. It is empirical facts prove that. Empirical facts prove that in the era of Cold War 2.0, China is not a suitable partner for the democracies. India is able, it is suitable, and it is reliable. All three conditions are met by India. And that is the big difference between India and any other large country. And that is why, given the hard work that's been put in over the last 10 years by this particular government, that is why, as Satoru very correctly says, the age of India has arrived. And this age is going to become very clear during the next 10 years. Why? Again, Megha, we are not just able, we are reliable and suitable. And the United States is able but not reliable. China is able but definitely not suitable. Only India meets these three conditions.
Okay, all right. Pathakrit, then talking about a number of these investments that have been made, the big ticket projects that have been given to a number of companies, and particularly when you talk about the Adani group of companies, when they have been given the project of opening up a port in Israel, or we talk about Sri Lanka, or then we talk about the Tamil Nadu port that is now going to be coming up very soon. As compared to the number of ports that bases, the military port bases, or for that matter trade port bases that have been built by China, and you compare it to United States of America, how much of a lag does India have in being able to shorten that gap?
Megha, unfortunately, in the past, there was a whole era when the private sector was not considered to be a critical part of your economic growth story. The difference has been under Prime Minister Modi's regime is that it acknowledges and appreciates the important role that the private sector plays in the whole thing. So let me tell you, for any kind of growth story or any kind of, if your aspiration is to become a $5 or a $7 trillion economy, you need to take your private sector along. And let me tell you, infrastructure is a very different ball game than any other conventional business, because the returns in the infrastructure sector are the gestation periods are very, very long. So you require players who are serious players and who have strong proficiency in that. So if you look at groups like the Adanis, they have actually excelled over the last 2 decades when it comes to constructing and operating successfully big ticket ports. When you talk about some of the key ports that the Adanis have in Gujarat and elsewhere, to the extent that in spite of certain political parties trying to be critical of some of these organizations for the sake of politics, when they are in power in their own respective states, they depend on them. So let me tell you, yes, we started late, but the kind of effort that is being made both by the private sector and by the government of India, I think it's not too long that you would start catching up. And we have already catched up quite a bit. The national logistics policy or the project Gati Shakti, if you see the large number of projects, critical infrastructure projects which are lagging and getting delayed for decades, have been finished up in the last 2 years. Also, when Israel allows the Haifa port to be operated by the likes of Adani, they do their own feasibility study to understand the capacity of that organization. That means that Adani, the likes of Adani or Reliance or L&T in engineering projects, they have that capacity to do it. And and what the benefit of it is that once these companies become global in certain respects, in their scalability, in the downstream, it would not only encourage other companies to become global in India, but it would help a large number of Indian ancillary companies, MSMEs, to also become critical part of the global supply
Okay.
chain. So I
Okay.
think we
Okay.
started
All
late,
right.
but
Fair
we're on the
enough.
right track.
Yeah. Rubinder, it is another interesting aspect. Unfortunately, it has not been paid attention to so much up until now. And we are 75 years into our independence. And the finance minister, made a specific mention about IMEC. This has been referred to by Prime Minister Narendra Modi as well several times ever since the announcement was made during the G20 Leaders Summit in Delhi. Unfortunately, there is not a single sea route that touches India on either side of the subcontinent that marks for a strategic, lucrative sea route where trade happens, when vessels transport from one place to another. Therefore, when you create IMEC, and that's why the importance of it is so crucial, because it moves from the Arabian Sea and it goes to UAE and Saudi Arabia and Israel and goes and touches upon Greece and then Europe. So this route had to be created for India to become an attractive logistical port, to have billions of dollars of trade parked into this area. And unfortunately, I'll again say that it had not been thought of up until today.
Thank you, Megha. A great point. The word geopolitics, we use it so often, especially in these discussions, is a mix of geography and politics. What you're highlighting is a very key aspect, geography. So look at science, look at logic. India's connectivity to Europe, how can it be the shortest in terms of time and expense, etc. And that is what this India, Middle East, Europe corridor is about. And when you quoted, I think also Finance Minister Sridharaman said that this route or route in coming years or hundreds of years from hence will be known as a pioneering initiative. It will be. It could be. Because according to logic and science, absolutely it works. It shortens the delivery time, it lowers the cost. But yes, there are geopolitical aspects with respect to this route. So therefore, definitely yes. See, these are the visions that you need to map out. Again, I'll come back to the idea of the matrix. Okay, the world of today in which we are all looking at partnerships and combinations is about a matrix. How do we get our goods and how do we import the goods? Because in this India, Middle East, Europe corridor, it's not only about Indian goods being exported, it's also about what we import, because we import. Like any nation imports something, exports something, we do that mix also. How do we create cost effective supply chains for this exchange? So therefore, this is a great example.
Right.
It's actually a very tall example because it will take a lot of work doing, especially given the right now the Israel-Gaza affairs. I'll come back to one quick question on maritime issues, which is one prominent aspect, and Satoru-san and Professor Nalva mentioned. See, I'll just take 20 seconds, I'll try. What China is doing in South China Sea is not only the Chinese Navy, it is also they're leveraging the Chinese fishing boats.
Yeah.
Chinese fishing boats are going out, 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 out. What they're doing, the Chinese fishing boats are going out 50 miles, 100 miles. They're putting a mothership there. The fishing boat does all its fishing, offloads its fish at this rig, middle of the ocean. The crew get to sleep, rest, diesel, water. The crew of this fishing boat go the next 50 miles. Next 50 miles, there's another mother boat standing like an oil rig. So what China is doing is not only Chinese Navy, China is empowering, or you could say, yeah, boosting the reach and creating an economic model for its fishing fleets.
No, absolutely. There are no two ways
India should
about
do
it.
the same. We
Yeah.
should do the same.
Yeah, and that's exactly the reason India needs to populate the rest of the continents, rest of the countries with the maritime boost that is provided by creation of these ports, by establishing these ports. Not to mention the domestic porting capacity has to be increased manifold as well, and we are moving towards that direction rapidly now. All right, I'm out of time. I thank all of you for joining me on the telecast.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.